You've been told it's harmless, that it's healthy, that doing it every day keeps your body young, your mind sharp, and your stress low. But what if that's not the whole story? What if something as private and routine as daily masturbation is quietly reshaping your brain, draining your energy, and creating distance in your most important relationships without you even realizing it? I'm Dr. James. I've spent over 30 years working with older adults across America, men and women in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, many of whom have come to me with silent questions they've carried for years. Questions about fatigue, sadness, disconnection, or even guilt, but never once connecting the dots to a habit they thought was harmless. And here's where it gets interesting. It's not the act itself that causes the damage. It's the hidden patterns, the frequency, the emotional motivation behind it, and what it slowly replaces in your life. In this video, I'll take you beneath the surface. You'll learn what really happens inside your body and brain when you masturbate daily as you age, and what no one warns you about until it's too late. Before we begin, if you haven't subscribed yet, I encourage you to do so and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss another honest, doctor-led conversation about your health and well-being. And if this topic resonates with you, type 1 in the comments. If it doesn't, type 0. Your feedback helps me create better, more meaningful content just for you. Now that we've set the stage, let's take a closer look at what's really happening beneath the surface. This isn't about judgment, it's about understanding. Because once you see the full picture, you'll be able to make informed, confident decisions for your body, your mind, and your relationships. Let's begin. 1. The brain's reward system. Hijacked by habit. I remember sitting across from a patient, let's call him Frank. He was 67, retired, widowed, and living alone. He came in complaining of fatigue, irritability, and a strange kind of emotional flatness. "I'm not depressed, doc," he said, "but I just don't enjoy anything the way I used to." He wasn't sleeping well, had lost interest in hobbies, and even stopped calling his kids as often. On paper, everything looked fine. His heart was strong, labs were stable, no obvious cause for concern. But after a quiet moment, Frank looked down and muttered, "I've been doing it every day, sometimes twice. It helps me sleep, or at least I thought it did." What Frank was experiencing is more common than people realize. You see, every time we reach climax, the brain releases dopamine, a surge of reward, pleasure, and temporary relief. That's not a bad thing, but the brain, especially as we age, becomes more sensitive to patterns. And when that dopamine rush comes day after day from the same source, it starts to lose its effect. The brain adapts. It becomes numb. That's when simple pleasures, coffee in the morning, a phone call from a friend, the sunset, begin to feel dull. It's not because life lost its color, it's because the reward system was hijacked. When that system is out of balance, it doesn't just affect mood. It can impact motivation, memory, even connection. People start drifting through their days, chasing that next rush without realizing they've trained their brain to crave short bursts of stimulation over deeper, lasting joy. And here's the hard truth. The longer that pattern continues, the harder it becomes to feel satisfied with the things that once brought you peace. But the brain isn't the only part of the body affected by this hidden routine. As we grow older, our physical systems become more delicate, and the effects begin to show in ways most never expect. Let's look at how daily stimulation impacts the body itself. 2. Physical health, fatigue, pelvic strain, and nerve sensitivity. I once had a longtime patient named Harold, 72 years old, proud of keeping active. He still played golf twice a week and took long walks every morning, but recently he came to me complaining of unusual fatigue. Not the kind you shake off with a nap, he said, along with lower back discomfort and occasional numbness in his groin area. What struck me wasn't just what he described, but what he hesitated to say. After a few gentle questions, he finally admitted that he had developed a daily habit of masturbation, something he leaned on more since his wife passed away 5 years prior. For men like Harold, and for women as well, daily stimulation can place quiet but consistent stress on the body, especially past the age of 60. The pelvic floor, the set of muscles supporting your bladder, bowel, and sexual organs, weakens with age. Frequent climax without rest can lead to fatigue in that region, sometimes affecting urinary control or causing discomfort during movement. Nerve endings, especially around the genitals, can become overstimulated, which leads to temporary numbness, tingling, or even a reduced response to touch over time. These aren't dangerous signs at first, but they are your body's quiet way of asking for balance. And while some might believe that regular sexual release boosts energy, in older adults it often does the opposite. Excessive release without proper recovery can actually lead to hormonal imbalances, lower testosterone in men, and general sluggishness. Many of my patients notice they're more tired, less motivated, and need longer to bounce back afterward, but they rarely connect the dots. These physical shifts are subtle, and they don't happen overnight, but if ignored, they accumulate until your body starts speaking louder through pain, fatigue, or even intimacy avoidance. And yet, even these physical changes are only part of the story. Because behind every habit is a reason, an emotional thread, and what happens when we use this habit not for pleasure, but as an escape. That's where things get even more complicated. 3. Stress relief or stress cycle. One afternoon, I received a call from a patient's daughter. Her father, Thomas, was 69 and recently widowed. She was worried about him, said he was isolating more, skipping his daily walks, and barely returning calls. When I saw him, Thomas shrugged off her concerns. "I'm fine," he told me, "just keeping to myself. Sometimes I need a little time alone. Helps me relax." As our conversation deepened, he confided something more personal. He'd started masturbating daily, sometimes more than once, especially when the loneliness crept in. "It calms me down," he said, "makes the evenings feel a little shorter." And I understood that. I really did, because for so many older adults, especially after loss, the nights are long, the silence gets heavy, and touch feels like a distant memory. Orgasm, even alone, releases oxytocin and dopamine, chemicals that bring temporary peace. But what Thomas didn't realize, and what I've seen in dozens of patients, is that over time, what starts as stress relief can slowly become a stress trap. Instead of helping you process sadness, it bypasses it. Instead of inspiring connection, it replaces it. And that temporary calm, it fades fast. What's left behind is often deeper emptiness and a growing reliance on a private habit to fill a very real emotional void. It's a cycle, one that feels soothing in the moment, but slowly chips away at your sense of purpose, presence, and peace. We don't talk enough about how coping mechanisms can quietly shift into avoidance, and we certainly don't talk enough about how that avoidance can affect not only how we feel inside, but how we show up in our closest relationships. Because when we start replacing real connection with a solo escape, it's not just our minds and bodies that are affected, our relationships begin to feel the strain too. And what happens next in those quiet shared spaces between partners is something many never see coming. 4. Relationship strain, the silent distance. I remember a couple I worked with years ago, David and Ellen. Married 43 years, they came to see me not because of a medical crisis, but because something unspoken had been building between them. Ellen felt distant, disconnected. David had become quieter, less affectionate, and less interested in intimacy. He wasn't angry or cold, just somewhere else. After some gentle conversation, he admitted that since retirement, and especially after some health scares, he'd turned to daily masturbation as a way to cope. "It's easier," he said, "less pressure, less chance of failure." And that right there was the moment everything shifted. For older couples, especially those with decades of shared history, the effects of solo habits can be deeply emotional. It's not about the act itself, it's about what it replaces. When daily masturbation becomes the primary outlet for sexual energy, it often leads to a quiet erosion of intimacy. Physical closeness fades. Conversations around needs and desires grow awkward or stop altogether. And that once vibrant sense of being seen, desired, and connected begins to blur. The saddest part is that most of this happens in silence. Neither partner wants to hurt the other. Many feel ashamed or confused, and so the distance grows, not out of anger, but out of avoidance. I've seen this distance lead to resentment, loneliness, and even heartbreak in couples who still deeply loved each other. It wasn't a lack of love, it was a lack of communication, masked by routine and discomfort. When sexual energy is directed inward day after day, it subtly tells the other person, "I don't need you." Over time, that message sinks in, even if no one says it out loud. But the role masturbation plays in relationships isn't the only hidden force at work. There's another factor, one that can reshape expectations, desensitize the senses, and shift what we think intimacy should look like. And it's sitting quietly on millions of screens every day. 5. Pornography, a hidden influence with lasting effects. A few years ago, a man in his early 70s, I'll call him Roy, came to see me after noticing a decline in his ability to feel aroused with his wife. He was embarrassed, frustrated, and quietly ashamed. "Everything works fine when I'm alone," he admitted, "but with her, I don't feel much. It's not her fault. It's me. I don't know what's wrong." As we talked more, Roy revealed he'd been using pornography almost daily. It started as a way to pass time after retirement, something to unwind with. But slowly it became routine. And now he couldn't seem to feel excited by real-life intimacy. This isn't uncommon. In fact, I hear some version of Roy's story more often than you might think. Pornography, especially when paired with daily masturbation, can quietly reshape the way your brain responds to arousal. It trains the mind to expect exaggerated stimulation, fast, visual, and emotionally detached. Over time, this creates a disconnect between the real and the imagined. The sights and sounds of real-life connection begin to feel dull by comparison. The emotional toll is just as deep. Many older adults turn to porn not out of lust, but out of loneliness, boredom, or grief. It becomes a way to escape not just from stress, but from the deeper ache of loss or disconnection. But instead of healing that wound, it numbs it. And the more it's used, the more it becomes the preferred substitute for connection, for comfort, for something once shared. This cycle doesn't just affect intimacy, it affects identity. People begin to question their worth, their desires, even their ability to connect. They withdraw further not because they want to, but because they've forgotten how not to. But how do you know when the habit has gone too far? What are the signs that your body and mind are quietly asking for help, even if you're not ready to admit it? That's what we need to talk about next. 6. Warning signs you should never ignore. Not long ago, I had a patient named Linda, 66 years old, who came in complaining of persistent low mood and a strange sense of detachment from her daily life. "I'm not exactly depressed," she said, "but I feel like I'm drifting, like something's missing." Her sleep was inconsistent, her energy was low, and she admitted to losing interest in activities that once brought her joy. As we talked more, she quietly confessed that she had developed a habit of masturbating every day, sometimes just to fill the silence, sometimes to soothe herself to sleep. She said she felt a little embarrassed afterward, but also unsure why. That's the moment I started paying closer attention. Because behind that soft admission were the classic signs I've learned to look for. Indicators that a private habit is starting to shape a person's well-being. When you feel the urge to do it not because you want to, but because you feel like you have to, that's a red flag. When it interferes with how you sleep, think, or connect with others, that's a signal. When you feel a lingering sadness, shame, or emptiness afterward, that's not something to brush off. And if it's a secret you're keeping from a partner, or even from yourself, it might be time to ask why. These signs often go unnoticed because they don't show up as dramatic changes. They come quietly. A little more tiredness, a little more withdrawal, a little less joy. But over time, they add up. The good news is our bodies and minds are always speaking to us. We just have to learn how to listen. And once you hear those signals, once you recognize the pattern, the next question is, what do you do about it? How do you break free from something that's become so familiar without shame and without fear? The answer isn't about quitting, it's about restoring balance, and that's exactly where we're headed next. 7. How to reclaim balance and peace. I remember a conversation with Margaret, 70 years old, full of grace and honesty. She looked at me and said, "I don't want to give it up entirely. I just don't want it to run my life anymore." That moment stuck with me because that's what this is really about. Not shame, not guilt, but choice, awareness, balance. For so many older adults, masturbation becomes more than just a physical act. It turns into a ritual of escape, a substitute for comfort or connection. But healing doesn't come from stopping cold or punishing yourself. It begins with curiosity and kindness toward your own behavior. Ask yourself, what am I really looking for when I do this? Is it release or is it relief from something deeper? If you find that this habit is taking more than it's giving, there are gentle ways to bring things back into balance. Set a rhythm that honors your energy instead of draining it. Replace overstimulation with something nourishing, like walking outdoors, reconnecting with a loved one, reading something that feeds your spirit. Bring back touch, not just sexual but meaningful. Hugs, hand-holding, simple presence, and perhaps most importantly, talk to someone. A doctor, a therapist, a trusted friend. Silence keeps us stuck. Conversation moves us forward. And don't underestimate the power of small shifts. Every change you make toward connection, rest, or real joy strengthens your body and restores your peace of mind. You're not broken, you're adapting. You're remembering who you are, beyond the habit, beyond the cycle. So where do we go from here? We've talked about the science, the emotions, the quiet costs of a private routine, but in just a moment, I want to leave you with something deeper. One final truth that I share with every patient, something most people overlook, but that could change the way you see your health, your habits, and even your future. Conclusion, a final word from the doctor. Over the years, I've sat across from countless patients, men and women just like you, who carried quiet questions they were too afraid or too embarrassed to ask. And the truth is, they weren't looking for permission. They were looking for peace, for clarity, for a way to understand what their bodies and hearts were really trying to tell them. We've talked about the science, the way the brain's reward system can be overstimulated, how physical strain and fatigue show up more clearly as we age, and how habits once meant for stress relief can quietly become a source of more stress. We've looked at how these patterns can affect not just our bodies, but our relationships, our expectations, our sense of joy, and even our self-worth. And we've opened up space for a conversation that's long overdue about what it means to age with intention, not shame. If there's one thing I want you to take away, it's this. Masturbation is not the enemy, but the patterns we build around it, the reasons we turn to it, the frequency we rely on it, and the things it quietly replaces, those are worth examining. Because your time, your energy, your connection to others, those are precious. You are not too old to feel joy. You are not too far gone to feel change. And it's never too late to rewrite the story of your body and your habits with compassion, clarity, and choice. So as you move forward, I invite you to ask yourself not just what you're doing, but why, and whether it's bringing you closer to the life you want or slowly pulling you away from it. This conversation may have started with one question, but the answers, they reach far deeper. Thank you for trusting me with your time. Stay curious, stay kind to yourself, and most of all, stay connected to your health, to your truth, and to the people who matter most.